Right. Hello, good morning, and good afternoon and good evening. and dear Servas members and friends, worldwide, welcome to join the first Servas Peace Forum this year, 2025. And this is May, Co-Peace Secretary of Servas International. Today, our topic is about environment. Wow, we have almost 100 members registered, come from 36 countries and 5 continents. Very surprised that so many our members concerned about our environment. That's so good to know our Servas members really care our earth. Before we start our meeting, I would like to invite our Vice President, Carla, to say some words. Carla, please.
Oh, hi, May. Hi, everybody. I didn't know I was going to be the first one to speak. So I'm going to be very brief, just to tell you that environmental issues or caring for the planet has always been a main concern for Servas. Our members have been organizing throughout the years many initiatives that reflect this care for the planet, like peace walks or hiking in nature, conferences around the theme of environmental conservation. Last year, when we were celebrating the 75th anniversary of Servas, the Servas International Peace Secretaries launched a campaign for members to plant trees, and this was a huge success. In many countries, there were Servas members planting trees. And like I said before, we have also had Servas conferences about environment. And last year in August, our friends from Kenya organized a conference near Mombasa, an international conference. And the main theme was a peaceful world through environmental conservation. And I went there, and as a lot of people, and that's when I met Clara Payard. She's originally from France, but she's living in the UK, so she's a member of Service Britain and Ireland. And we talked a lot about this topic because Clara, she's activist, environmental activist, and we had always thought in Service International Executive Committee that we needed someone who could be representing um, this theme in Servas, because although we have very many spread initiatives around the world, we needed to concentrate that in one person. So we asked Clara if she would agree to being a coordinator of a Servas environmental team. And she accepted this invitation. So we were very happy with that. And so Clara, she suggested to make the first Servas Peace Forum of 2025 around this theme of environmental conservation. So we are very grateful to Claire for having accepted this challenge to be the Servas environmental coordinator and for leading this session today. So thank you, Clara, and I hope that many members will join this theme because we really need to care for the planet. It's our only home. We don't have another one. So we need to do our best to make sure that we live in a safe place and that we can achieve peace, because we cannot have peace in the world if not everybody is happy and you know, no wars. So That's all from me now.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla. So now we have a new volunteer. It's environment coordinator. So let's welcome Clara to facilitate today's forum. Clara, please.
Thank you so much, May, and thanks, Carla, for all the support you have provided to organize this Peace Forum. I'm really pleased that many of you have joined us, and I can see a few familiar faces. So it's really nice to be there. Since 2018, Servas International included in their constitution that climate change is very much a peace and social justice issue because its impact can lead to the displacement of people, which often hurts the impoverished more than the wealthy. Now we really want to be more active on the issue of the environment. Many Servas members are environmental activists, and this Peace Forum is just the first step. We will be looking, I don't want to do that on my own. I really want people to get involved. So I'm hoping that following this forum, some of you will join me to like a working group to start thinking about ideas about what we could do as Servas to participate to the efforts of the international community in combating climate change, educating our members, and supporting, initiatives across the world. And when I visited East Africa with Servas members this summer, I was very pleased to, meet my friend Rehema, who is there today, and see, the amazing work that she and others were doing, for example, with schools, but also with communities impacted by extractivist projects. And many of you were with me when we visited in Uganda, in the small village of Buyoga. We visited a really good project of a forest farming, sustainable agriculture. And I can see Stephen is here today. So I'm really pleased he's been able to join us. And, Stephen has been courted this initiative. But today what we hope to achieve is to give you food for thoughts about what we are facing in terms of the climate crisis. I'm sure many of you have already been affected, or your family and friends have been affected by droughts, floods, fires, storms, hurricanes, and other extreme weather events, which is affecting everybody on the planet. And we are seeing a lack of action across the world on this issue. So we've got 3 fantastic speakers joining us today who are going to explore different dimensions of environmental and climate justice that I think Servas members were particularly interested to hear about. So I'm really pleased that we've been joined by Dennis Fernando, who is a campaigner, a friend of the earth. We'll talk about the connection between wars, peace, and the climate and environmental crisis. We've got Rehema Peter, who is a Servas member in Tanzania and from an organization called Partnership for a Green Future. Rehema will explore the issue faced by people in the global south. We know the effect of climate change disproportionately affect people in the global south. But also talking of some of the fantastic work she's been doing in East Africa. And finally, but not least, we will hear from Danny Shivers, who is an author and carbon analyst. We'll talk about the issue of carbon offsettings. That's something that many of you have heard about. Maybe you've paid into carbon offsetting schemes, and he's going to tell us about example of alternatives. Following the contribution from the speakers, we will take a moment to take a few questions or reflections from the participants. We'll have about 15 minutes to do that. And then we will invite you to break out into small group discussions. May and myself have been hesitating how we can group people, and we decided that because we want you to go back to your national service groups and your regional groups to take action and organize, we've decided to break people out into area groups. So hopefully that'll be good for your conversations. And hopefully we'll get some feedback from some of the groups before we close this forum. So that's all for me. Thanks again for joining us. And I'm now going to invite Dennis to make the first contribution.
Thank you very much, and it's very good to be here. Yeah, my name is Dennis Fernando. I'm the Rights and Justice campaigner at Friends of the Earth, and just very great to be part of a conversation which is bringing together these particular themes. So as people will know, we have already seen the hottest year on record with devastating weather events in the recent times, which Clara referred to, but also across 2024. And these are getting more frequent across the globe, costing lives and livelihoods. And climate breakdown and war will increasingly create an unstable world in which we will see refugees, migrants, and impacted people vilified, which is why we are seeing in Britain an active far right and those who try to stand up for refugees being vilified as well. And also this idea of needing to stop the boats as the overarching narrative without looking into the reasons why people are risking their safety to get into boats in the first place. So rising temperatures, heavier rainfall, and more frequent and intense extreme weather are projected to cost $38 trillion in damages each year by the middle of this century. So as the temperature goes up, the damage goes up, the costs go up in dollars. And last year we saw the real possibility of a regional war with the way that Israel was behaving in attacking many countries in the Middle East. And at one point there was the open discussion from people in the military about targeting oil refineries with total disregard for the fact that this would mean carbon emissions as a result of the conflict. Just wanted to say a little bit about the kind of approach of the West being in the wrong direction. So the US was the highest military spender in 2023 with $916 billion dedicated to the military. In the same year, they only $17.5 billion at the COP28 for the loss and damage fund. So if people don't know, that's about the impacts that climate change is having, particularly on the global south, and what the West is doing because of the Industrial Revolution that originated in the West and the fact that that was foisted onto countries through colonialism. What is the West doing to make compensation for the fact that this system is in place? So that money would go both on like the damage and the losses that are put in place, but all that have happened as a result of climate change, but also looking at more environmentally friendly energy consumption. And so only 90 billion was spent on climate finance in 2021, far below the amount required to tackle the climate crisis. NATO members states have accounted for over 233 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent greenhouse gas emissions. And with Trump now in the White House promising to drill baby drill and calling oil liquid gold, we think that things are only going to get worse on the carbon emissions front. And he is already using the military to respond to migrants, which is the deportation flights are being done by the military. This is the playbook of how the billionaires are going to deal with the movement of people over this next century. We're seeing it happen right now in the last week. So we know that there is going to be an increasing interrelation between conflict and carbon emissions and the creating of more emissions. And we also face a future that is seeing funds increasingly invested in military, which fuels conflict, when funding could be better stopped on funding could be better spent on stopping runaway climate change. I wanted to talk about the link between conflict and social justice, as FO is an environmental and social justice organization. So I don't know if people know of the organization Civicus, but it's an international monitor of civil society, and civil society is under attack, and that is deepening as conflict intensifies. And 1 in 6 people are currently exposed to conflict. Conflict-related deaths are at their highest in decades, with civilian casualties up 62% in 2023. And according to Global Witness, at least 196 people were killed in 2023 for defending the environment, bringing the total number of killings between 2012 and 2023 to 2,106. Britain's own status, according to Civicus, has been downgraded in 2022 to represent our own repressive laws. So the UN Rapporteur on Environmental Defenders said that the UK's Public Order Act, which restricts protest rights, is draconian. And I don't know whether people saw, but this last weekend just gone, there have been a number of arrests at the major Palestine demo in the wake of the fragile ceasefire that has happened in Palestine as a result of the Public Order Act. The Civicus report shows that where the far right advances across Europe, protest rights face increasing restriction. Far right are often militarily patriotic and climate deniers, which also is targeting the communities seeking refuge from war and extreme events, weather events. So it's in all of our interests, especially those of us in the environmental movement, to understand that opposing the far right is our issue and to ensure that we stand up on this. In Britain, we have seen the election of the Reform Party, followed by far-right eruptions across the streets this summer. People may have seen that reported in the news. And as an anti-racist organisation, Friends of the Earth took a stance on rejecting racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, reaching out to our stakeholder colleagues who were potential targets of the far right. I'm proud that our allyship has been welcomed by most of those most impacted by the far right. And I'm proud that one of our local groups is actually engaged right now in rejecting the far right locally, where they are targeting an asylum seeker hostel. And we also spoke at the demonstration against Tommy Robinson, who people might have seen. Elon Musk is now siding with a far-right agitator in Britain and trying to get him freed from prison, which just goes to show the level to which he wants to enable such actors within Britain. So there is a demonstration coming up this weekend called by Tommy Robinson supporters, and there will be an anti-fascist demonstration in opposition to it on the 1st of February in London. International solidarity is central to our work. I'm from Faux Uni, which is England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Faux Uni works with our International Federation on solidarity, and this work can save lives. As an international federation, we can respond rapidly to violations and mobilize internationalist support for threatened communities. And we can support national groups to prevent violations and fight against corporate and state interests when they are complicit in such crimes. Our sister organization in Gaza, which is called Pengon, lost 5 members in the Israeli airstrikes during the assault on Gaza. And it's estimated that over 2/3 of Pengon staff homes have been destroyed, and all Pengon offices in Gaza have been damaged. Many Pengon members have been displaced more than 3 times. All members in Gaza face daily trauma. And we called for a ceasefire, arms embargo, supported our local groups in lobbying the Foreign Minister David Lammy, and around 20 of our staff and supporters joined the big Palestine demonstration last October on the year anniversary as part of the climate justice bloc. So on top of the horrific human cost to the people of Palestine, the environmental cost in Gaza is unprecedented, exposing the community to rapidly growing soil, water and air pollution, and risks of irreversible damage to the natural ecosystems. Carbon emissions during the first 2 months of the war in Gaza were greater than the annual carbon footprint of more than 20 of the world's most climate vulnerable nations. And since the invasion, 170 million tons of CO2 and other greenhouse gases have been released into the atmosphere. Prior to the assault, Pengon supported farmers, implemented renewable energy projects, and documented environmental violations in Gaza. So our solidarity is all the more important, especially given the UK is one of Israel's strongest allies. Another example of our work is in Mozambique. Corporations like Total, ENI, and ExxonMobil are prospecting for gas in Mozambique, and there are reports that energy companies have paid the Mozambican government to deploy soldiers to protect their interests. Increased military presence has led to allegations of human rights abuses by the army, such as killing local people and extorting and blackmailing families for the financial compensation they received from Total. Mercenaries from across the world are operating, many of whom are illegally and some of whom are indiscriminately killing in the area. Violations include killings, beheadings, and entire communities fleeing the coastal region of Cabo Delgado. Armed groups have been terrorizing civilians since 2017, leaving thousands dead and forcing almost 700,000 people to flee the violence. Some have had to flee to neighboring countries and provinces, and many are in centres. The UK is funding gas projects in the area with £1 billion. This means our public money is invested into a project that is ruining lives, fueling violence, and driving climate breakdown even further. The emissions from using this extracted gas parallels the total emissions for the aviation sector for all EU member states combined. So we are supporting our sister group in Mozambique, who have worked in and with the local community directly affected by the gas projects, and they have highlighted the human rights violations that are carried out due to the gas projects. Here, our legal team took court action against the UK government in 2022, but unfortunately, our case was disallowed by the court as full consensus wasn't reached by both judges. Subsequent appeals were not successful, however. Launching this case has helped secure a UK government policy to stop new investment in international fossil fuels using public funds. So Friends of the Earth is also campaigning with the Corporate Justice Coalition for a new due diligence law to hold all companies to account for environmental harms and human rights abuses in their supply chains. And finally, the UK's government's international policy is facing in so many different directions at the same time, with an unshakable commitment to NATO and the nuclear deterrent, new trade deals alongside leading a clean power alliance and wanting to modernize for international development. So there's lots and lots of contradictions going on in the UK government policy. Trump being added to the equation is only going to make things even more complex, but it just goes to show how important it is that we all stand up at this very important time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for your insights and making the links between all those very complex issues that peace is at the heart of Servas International ethos. We believe that by meeting each other, we can reduce the number of wars, but seeing like the connection between those wars and the impact on the rights of migrants and refugees, also the right to protest and the rise of far-right government across the world. All of that is combining in further threats to the environment. So thank you very much for your insights. And we're going to listen to the two other speakers. But if you've got questions for Dennis, please hold them for now, and we'll take them all together after the other speakers. So thanks, Dennis. Our next speaker is going to be Rehema Peter from Tanzania, Partnership for Green Future. Are you with us, Rehema? Are you ready?
Yes, yes.
Okay, you can go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I will look at who will explore the issues faced by people in Global South. Yeah, thank you. Actually, thank you, Dennis. I really learned a lot from your presentation. It was so resourceful. Thank you. Yeah. So I think before we go to that, maybe we just look first at the issues faced by the people in the Global South, especially the inequalities and the differences between the Global South and then in the Global South, which is accelerated by climate change. Yeah, one of the issue is the energy poverty. In Tanzania specifically, only 42% of the people do have access to electricity. While as if you compare to countries like UK, France, and other countries in the global north, you find like 100% of the people do have access to electricity. And if you look at the issue of energy by itself, you find that because of climate change, we are facing a lot.
Oh, I thought it was maybe my internet connection, but Rehema, we've lost you. Okay. Right. Yeah, even internet connection is like a tricky one. We try to arrange for Rema to go in a place with a good Wi-Fi, but I think we may have to wait for a bit and see if she rejoined. Okay. Hopefully she's going to be able to reconnect. Sorry about that. Just when she was starting to get into the meat of things. But I think while we wait to see if Rema's connection can come back, maybe we can hear from Danny. Danny, are you ready to do your presentation?
Yep, that's fine.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think you should be able to share your screen to show your slides.
Right. Perfect.
Thank you so much for joining us, Danny. And yeah, that's your go. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Really good to see you all. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I've got a few slides, but they're very simple.
Actually, I'm really sorry because Rema is back.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry about the tech problem, but Rema, we didn't know if you were able to rejoin, so we were going to hear Danny. But since you're back, do you want to have a go?
Yeah, he can proceed if he has started.
No, it didn't start, so I'm coming back to you. You were in full flow.
Okay. Sorry. Maybe it's because I just talked about infrastructures. Yeah. So another thing is the high poverty ratio, like I mentioned, 44 in countries like Tanzania, where I come from, it is 44.9, while in countries like UK, it is 0.3. So the people like my country and other people from global south, we suffer the high poverty rate, in which now the issue of climate change, it does accelerate because of all these calamities which come along with climate change. Another thing is issues like poor waste management, issues like limited transport system, issues like poor housing condition. And it's not only poor housing condition, but actually most of the people from global south, especially from my country, the housing condition is very poor, but even in the meals, like you can find very few people can afford even 3 meals per day. We have a lot of people, especially from grassroots, who can afford only 2 meals per day, and sometimes 1, and it is a very low quality meal. People do take what they get, not what they want to get, which is contrary to most of the people from the global north. Another thing is the issues of gender imbalances, because in global south, already social inequalities have already impact and make the people suffer. So when the issues of environmental destruction, especially the global warming, it even accelerates the issues. Now I was looking at the issues that are impacting people from global south. But now with these differences, now the issue is these differences or the gap between global north and global south. Actually, you can find now the gap emerged out of the exploitative trade. I think I think we all know, I don't need to go very deep on that. From colonial eras to neocolonialism, now we are facing, we have been put into serious debt that are impayable, you see. And this is because countries from the global north have become very powerful economic and political as well. But all these have result from big investment in factories and industries, whereas they use mostly fossil fuels and the coal. And as we know, the major cause of carbon emissions is coal, fossil fuels, and gas. as for the coal mining, I think it contributed to the carbon emission, 45% of the carbon emission. While as fossil fuels, it is, I think, 33%. And gas, it is like 20%. And if you look at the statistics, for example, in countries like Tanzania, contribution to the carbon emission is only 0.2%. But in return, we are the one who are suffering most when it comes to the issue of climate change or the impacts of climate change. So you find that those who are not impacted that much are the ones who actually have contributed massively to carbon emissions. But because of the good economic condition, because of good economic, yeah, they can manage, they have good disaster management systems and capitals and all that, technologies and everything. But when it becomes to our issues, it is really, really difficult. And on top of that, countries like Tanzania, you find like in Tanzania, 75% of people solely depend on agriculture. And mostly it is seasonal agriculture. So we are expecting like moderate rainfall and, you know, the seasons to be in place as it is supposed to be, so as for people to be able to grow their plants, I mean, to grow food and manage to get food. And because most of our farmers also, we farm for food, not very much for commercial purpose. So when, and it like in my countries, have been like, I think 4 years now, we experience either prolonged droughts or prolonged rainy season. Like last year, we normally experience heavy rainfall from March to end of May. But like 2023, we had rainfall from October 2023 to May 2024. So you find like most of the crops were washed out by drought, but infrastructures destroyed, even people lost their houses, you know. So kind of from this side, though, we have contributed less to global warming, but we are the ones suffering the most. And by saying this, actually, I'm so grateful for this initiative that Servas International is now addressing the issue of environment destruction. So by saying this, there have been a number of kind of solutions, trying nations and countries, parties have been trying to come up with solutions or kind of mitigation to these issues. But again, another problems become that those who have influence to these mitigation mechanisms are the ones who are very strong politically and economically as a result of investment on coal and fossil fuels, which is accelerating the issue. So you find most of the solution are kind of, I can say like they are coming up with kind of a mask solution, which is not really like solving the issues. You find the issue of like maybe compensations. Now, for me, actually, I wonder like, how can you, like someone is suffering, losing life, the living and all that, and then you are trying to compensate the compensation, which actually does not really go on people on grassroots who are suffering most. But again, what I was expecting is to invest more on cutting the emissions. Not like, it's like someone is sick and you say, oh, no problem, keep suffering. When you die, I will cover the funeral, you know. So the issue, if the issue of compensation is there, okay, then you should go along with cutting the emissions, because most of the issues like compensation, yes, but there is this we call greenwash, like planting trees, like, carbon credit and all these stuff. They are there, but are they really the solution? Can planting trees reduce the emission as compared to the amount of emissions that is still produced out of using fossil fuels and coal? So planting trees and all this kind of greenwash is good, yes, but first cutting the emissions. Now the problem is the decision maker, those with influence, are the ones still who are benefiting from investment on coal and fossil fuels. So you can hear, like, there have been a number of efforts, even this international agreement, like Paris Agreement, like Kyoto and all that. What I don't understand is that the countries are getting into agreement, they sign, yes, with big celebrations and all that, yeah. But then what? If someone don't are there, what will happen? I was learning, like, why are countries put into sanction? And I learned that it is because the country sanctions you come out of when one country is seems to threat the security of another country. Now I wonder if one country, one nation, will be put on sanction for threatening safety of one country. What about the big multinational companies, the nations who are investing massively on fossil fuel and coal mining, destroying the whole, like, the whole world, making lots of people suffer, disturbing the nature and all that? What is supposed to happen to these people? Threatening the biodiversity and all that, the life of people, causing a lot of massive suffering. So I think it's high time now, and I'm glad that Servas is coming in. We need to, like, have so many parties, organizations, groups, and people coming together to keep advocating for realistic solutions to this issue of carbon emission, or the issue of climate change, because it is, I think, it's the leading issue. It is the leading problem. It is something that should be treated as an emergency that need the attention of each and everyone, be it nations, be it companies, be it whatever it is. So I'm glad that finally Servas International is addressing this issue. I don't know if I still have time.
Thank you so much, Rema. I think you've come up to your time. I'm really grateful about your insights in highlighting those inequalities and, giving us some of your experience in Tanzania. And also thank you for all the work that you are doing, on the front line of the climate crisis with women and with, local communities that are affected by infrastructure projects. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm now going to take our last speaker, Danny Shivers. So yeah, Danny, if you're ready, I think you're going to also use some slides, but thank you for joining, Dan.
Thanks so much, everyone. Brilliant to hear both those talks by Dennis and Rahima. And Rahima, actually, your talk was a really good introduction into mine, because what you were saying about some of the problems of fake solutions and greenwash leads very nicely into this topic, which is the topic of carbon offsetting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and be quick and just say a little bit about the problems with carbon offsetting, and how one network that I'm working with has a different way of doing things. So I'm going to kind of share this alternative way of doing things that this organisation I work with, Gallery Climate Coalition, is doing, in the hope that it probably won't work exactly the same for Servas, but it might give you some ideas and ways to think about it that maybe will be helpful when you're making your own plans. So I'll share a few quick slides, and let's just get this working. Okay, hopefully you can see this slide. I'll just make it bigger.
Yes, we can see them. Thank you.
Great. So yes, so I'm a carbon footprint expert and analyst. I've been doing this for nearly 20 years. My job is to work with organizations who are trying to reduce their environmental impact, trying to reduce their carbon emissions, and I'm there to help give them information and advice on how to do that. And at the moment, I'm doing that work for a number of different organizations. I'm doing it with some NGOs like Christian Aid, Concern Worldwide, helping them reduce their emissions. Also working with a lot of people in the arts, in arts organisations, and particularly this network called the Gallery Climate Coalition. And the Gallery Climate Coalition is a network of more than 1,500 arts organisations in 50 countries. So it includes art galleries, museums, artists, studios, art fairs, magazines, auction houses, art shipping companies, and all of them, by joining the network, they say they've pledged to halve their emissions between 2020 and 2030. So they've set this what I think is quite a good target in terms of what climate science is saying we need to do. We actually are pushing them to go further, especially those in the global north, because as we've been hearing, actually a lot more responsibility is on organisations in the global north who have that historical responsibility for climate change. So we're trying to say arts organisations in the global north need to be doing more than halving their emissions. They need to be cutting them by 70, 80, 90%. But that's the way we're trying to push things. And the really important thing about these targets, if you think of all the emissions that are coming from the art galleries themselves, but also all of their travel, their flights, they're moving art around the world, they're burning like gas to heat their buildings and so on. We're not only going to reduce that, we're going to say we're going to reduce that in the real world, and we're not going to use this practice called carbon offsetting. So people aren't allowed to use carbon offsetting to meet their targets. Just a quick reminder of what carbon offsetting is. It's the idea that if you do something that creates some pollution, you then pay somebody somewhere else to reduce some emissions somewhere else to kind of cancel out your pollution. And as Rahim has already said, there's real danger in this because it opens the door to lots of things that aren't really solutions, that aren't really making your emissions go away, and gives you an excuse to not reduce your emissions. But the thing is, so Gallery Climate Coalition, GCC, this network of arts organisations, has said we are not doing carbon offsetting. We're going to do something different. And the reason why GCC is doing this, and why actually other charities I work with, other organisations are now stopping doing carbon offsetting. Part of it is because there's so much evidence now that it isn't. So many of the carbon offsets that have been sold already haven't actually worked. They haven't reduced emissions. And there's lots more evidence of this. And or worse, there's more and more examples of where these carbon offset projects are actually doing harm. Where, for example, indigenous people are being pushed off their land so that trees can be planted there instead. And there's all kinds of harm happening, particularly in the global south, with some of these projects. So there's the idea that actually it can be doing harm. Another really fundamental problem with a lot of carbon offsetting is that you say, okay, I have emitted a ton of carbon dioxide. I'm going to pay someone to remove a ton of carbon dioxide somewhere else, and often that will be, yes, we will remove that carbon for you, but it will be by planting trees, and that carbon will be gradually sucked out of the air over the next 20, 30, 40 years. That's no good. If you've just put a load of pollution in the air now, it is heating up the climate right now. It's causing droughts and floods and storms right now. there's no good sucking it out of the air over 20, 30, 40 years. We have these really urgent climate targets. We need to be reducing emissions across the world in the next 5 years. It like saying, oh, this will reduce emissions in decades. That's too late, and it doesn't help. The only way that some people are saying, well, we can take some emissions out of the air right now with new technologies that are going to suck the carbon out of the air and put it underground. You hear about these sort of carbon removal, carbon capture projects, and there are a few around the world that are running. The problem is, firstly, they're very, very expensive to do. And secondly, we don't know if they'll really keep that carbon under the ground. So there's a big question that we've decided with GCC, with the Arts Network, that why should we spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on a project that might put some carbon underground, when instead we could spend that money on just reducing our emissions and doing something more useful that will have a much bigger impact. And the other key thing is that none of these sort of offsetting ideas, they're not creating real change. They're not tackling the root causes of the problem. They're just sticking a plaster on it, and at that very best. So is this really the best way to spend money and resources? And it's a particular issue with flights, where often if you buy a flight, there's a little button that says, offset my flight. And you click that box and you send a little bit of money. And then it gives you the idea that, oh, that's it. My flight is now neutral and safe and is doing no harm. And it takes away that incentive to think really carefully and deeply about every flight. Because, everybody needs to understand, everyone who's flying, especially those in the richer countries, need to think about the privilege of air travel and the true weight of its impact, really understand it. And because low impact flights don't exist, they're not going to exist in time to help us. So we need to be really serious and think about our flying really seriously. And pressing an offset button is the opposite of thinking seriously. So this is what GCC, the Gallery Climate Coalition, this is what we do instead. We say to all those members, all those 1,500 arts organisations, we say, don't spend money on offsets. Instead, take some money and put it aside into something called a strategic climate fund. That's just what we're calling it. You could call it anything. That's what we call it. And then that money is spent not on some carbon offset project, but instead you spend it on speeding up reducing your own emissions, just as Rahima was saying, spend it on real cuts, and or supporting projects around the world that are actually making a real difference, rather than saying they're going to remove some carbon in the future. Things that are actually strategically making a difference now, supporting grassroots projects that really matter. And as soon as you get out of this mindset of like, we need to cancel out a certain number of tons of carbon, instead you think, where can we best spend this money? Where are the real projects that are making a difference strategically, even if you don't know how many tons of carbon? Who cares how many tons of carbon? What's actually going to make a real difference strategically to people's lives and to help with the climate crisis and to stop fossil fuels? Then you suddenly have so many more better ways to spend that money when you ask that different question. So where we get to is this idea in GCC that we need to reduce our own emissions as organisations or whatever, but also we all have responsibility to support a wider change, and especially those in global north, as we said. And so strategic climate funds are one way to do that. It's funding solutions without pretending that makes our own emissions disappear. So GCC has a list of recommended frontline climate justice projects that we say to those art members, we say, if you're going to put money aside and spend them on these things, and they're things like Indigenous people's forest defence funds, so where Indigenous people are fighting against extractive projects, giving them money to defend their forests, because we know that's actually the best, most effective way to protect forests, is to give money to the people who live in those forests and who own that land or have the right to that land. Or putting money into legal battles against fossil fuel extraction, or putting it into grassroots projects that are going to support, local solar entrepreneurs in Africa and things like this, where you're putting the money where it's actually going to make a difference, and you're not caring, does it reduce a certain amount of carbon in a certain time? You're saying this is making a strategic difference now, and it's going to and you know, accelerate change. And often we'll say to arts organizations, you know, if there are communities where you work, where you have a connection, there are projects you know are good, that are making a difference, that are creating more systemic change, that are actually more strategic, that aren't about, you know, numbers on a spreadsheet, but are about real change, then those are the ones to support. I'll be very quick. I just need to finish now, running out of time. But the other thing we say is, to GCC members, is to the amount to spend should be based on not how much you've emitted this year, but more how much can you afford. And that's where, again, the more wealthy organizations should be putting more money in. It doesn't matter what your emissions are today. It's about we all have a responsibility, especially in the global north. And so GCC says, look, just put a percentage of your income aside and spend that on good projects, and don't try and make it match your emissions, because that, you know, that isn't helpful. That gives a kind of fake idea that you're cancelling out your emissions. Instead, have a plan to reduce your emissions and also put some money aside to spend on real projects that are going to make a change on the ground. So engagement and action, not offsetting, and it requires a different mindset, but I think it's also a more positive one, and it makes us feel more engaged, like we're actually making a real difference, rather than trying to pretend that we're making the problem go away. If you want to know more about that, there's a link to the Strategic Climate Fund's idea. And yeah, I'll stop there. I'm out of time, but I hope that was useful, and I'll share some links in the chat that might be helpful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Danny, for your contribution. Really interesting. And of course, we will circulate, you know, the link to the videos if you want to watch it again. And Danny's presentation, we'll have a link to that. We're just running slightly behind time, but we're now going to take a little bit of time to take some questions from the participants. Following that, you will have time in some breakout space to explore a little bit more what you've just heard and explore ideas about what to do. But I just want to see if there were some questions for our speakers. And what we'll do is I will take the questions together and then give an opportunity to the speakers to come back for a very short period of time. So if you would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand, electronic hand or physical hand. You can also put the question in the chat if you prefer. And I think I did see one question already from Sue in the UK, was saying, I would like to hear from the speakers on their view on Servas members flying, because obviously we are a travel organization, travel and peace organization. Many people will fly across the world. I have to say that more people from the global north will fly than our members in the global south, but that's maybe like a question for Danny or some of the other speakers. Anybody else? Quite a lot to take in with lots of different dimensions. Okay, I've got Francisco. You've got a question for Rema. Would you like to come in? Oh, sorry, I've got Brazil, Alvani Santiago. You are on mute? Okay.
So greetings from Brazil. Then we are happy we are hosting the COP, the Conference of the Parts, this November in Belém. Thank you very much for Danny and the Rema for the pointing and discussion. And I would like to ask Rema if she knows what the percentage of trees that we plant survives. I can write it down because both Danny and Rema point out the question of greenwashing of the action of just planting tree, because what we have learned is that many plants, many trees did not survive.
Thank you. So yeah, the question of the percentage of trees planted that actually survive. If somebody's got information
like in
about
Tanzania, like in Africa.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Next, I've got Karen from the US. Do you want to come in, Karen?
Yeah, hi. We started the tree planting initiative in the US with Servas this year. And to answer the question Avani asked, I was told by the leader of Servas Italy that she spoke with the climate scientist who was advising the Italian parliament, and they said the best way to fight climate change is planting trees. They said everything else you do is okay, but the best way, you should plant trees. And so we chose an organization that works very hard to find the right type of trees for the environment, including the changes in the climate in that region. And they target areas that have been injured by fires or by mining or other environmental destruction. And they work with local groups to plant them and to nurture them going forward. And so we work with One Tree Planted. So I understand that there are organizations who just take money and plant trees and leave. And so it's worth finding a good organization. I agree with Alvani.
Thank you, Karen. Is there any last questions before I ask our speakers to come back? Okay. And this is only the start of a conversation as well. So yeah, there were like 3 questions. One on the sort of percentage of trees that are planted that survive. A question about what do you think about the Servas members flying across the globe, and then Karen's points about tree planting being the best solution to fight climate change, and some tree planting initiatives are actually positive. Dennis, would you like to come back on any of this? You haven't got to answer every single question, but just, you know, maybe like a minute or two, just tell us your thoughts. Sorry, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, thank you. Could you repeat the first question? Sorry, my internet cut out at that point.
The first question was just about the percentage of trees that are planted that will survive. So it's quite a specific question.
Yes. Okay. So I can't comment on the percentage of trees that will survive, but I think it's worth looking up things like China's Great Green Wall, which is an initiative that's been going on for decades of trying to combat desertification through exactly the planting of trees. I was just Googling it myself while we were looking at it, and the UN have made positive comment about that as an initiative. So there are ways in the world, and it's an increasingly important thing. I'll try and post a link from the UN about it if people want to look into that a bit more. In terms of the question of people flying, I suppose that's why I made the contribution about, you know, the carbon footprint as a concept. Yes, it is important, but that we all try and do carbon reduction measures. But whilst we're doing this, billionaires have got their own private jets. They're flying into places like Davos and the World Economic Forum on these private jets and with super yachts the whole time. They are responsible for frequent flying around the world. And if you look at the carbon footprint of the military, it is it's comparable to entire countries at times. So it's just to say that I'm all for people looking at their own carbon footprint and at their carbon emissions and reducing. But the people who have to do that the most are the people who are in the upper brackets of carbon emission, and those are the people with the money. Those are the people who are right now planning how to go into space. And the kind of emissions of pollution that will set off are astronomical in comparison. They are not facing in the direction of looking at the planet they're on. They're already thinking of the next planet that they're going to go to, which, by the way, is not there is no planet within the travel of the lifetime of a human being at the moment that we can reach, that we can even consider repopulating. So why is a very big question. So I just say that, like, those are important questions. at the same time, there are measures that can be put in place around that. So, for example, we're right now on a Zoom call around the world. Business doesn't necessarily have to fly around the world in order to meet. And so we're looking at progressive things around flying, like frequent flyer taxation, or there are other measures around things like private jets. We are Friends of the Earth as an organization is opposed to the third runway on Heathrow, because that is just going to send carbon emissions through the roof. So there is a live debate at the moment in Britain about whether Heathrow Airport, which is one of our major airports in Britain, gets a third runway. And we have opposed that in the past. We would oppose it not just for the carbon emissions, but for noise pollution, for a whole number of reasons. We would be opposed to that, and more in favour of public transport measures around that. So I think those were the two questions. I'm sorry if there was a third that I've missed, but I think those were the questions.
Thank you so much, Dennis. That's brilliant. Okay, I'm gonna call back Danny next.
Hi, yeah.
Any comments briefly?
Yeah, so on the flying question, I'd really back up what Dennis just said, and it's about looking at it case by case and thinking which flights are needed and which flights can be reduced. And yeah, I mean, as the point you were making, Dennis, just I think the statistic is in the UK, 70% of the flights are taken by 15% of the population, and globally, of course, in any given year, 90% of the world's population do not fly. 80% of the world's population have never been on a plane. It's about thinking, where's the responsibility for this? And when it comes to individual flights, I think it comes down to what's the purpose of it, and who is it for, and who is it benefiting. And also, I think with the organizations I work with, what we talk about is what example are we setting? And so if we're out there trying to talk about climate change, are we actually setting a good example in the organization itself? And that's where a lot of the arts organizations are working to reduce their emissions and to talk about it and to set that example, because we've seen all this evidence now that from all the global surveys that now most of the people in the world really care about the climate crisis and are worried about it. It's 70-80% of people are concerned, but most people also feel like other people don't care as much. There's this wrong perception. Everyone thinks I care about the climate crisis, but nobody else does. And the reason people think that nobody else does is because there aren't people talking about it, setting positive examples, taking action in every way they can, to show that they care and to show that action is worth it. And certainly that's the sense that a lot of people have. So what I would say is it's about thinking. I guess the one other example I give is one of the organisations I work with is the humanitarian charity Christian Aid, which we have lots of conversations about the sort of whether the sort of issues and ups and downs of those sorts of organisations, but Christian Aid had a plan to reduce its flights and succeeded in halving the amount of flights its staff were taking within a 5-year period, and has another target now of reducing its flights further. And it just shows that it can be possible with the correct planning and with the right things in place. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Danny, for your thoughts. And last but not least, Rehema, would you like to share your last thoughts on that a little bit briefly, because we also want to have conversation in breakout rooms.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe for me, I would like to make some clarity. Tree planting and all other this kind of the measures used to mitigate carbon emissions, they are okay. I've said they are okay, but the major thing actually is energy diversity. To people to divest to renewable energy, because when you plant a tree, until it absorbs the carbon, it takes a number of years. Okay, while the issue is very serious, and in turn, the amount of carbon still emitted from the factories, other kind of and other sources of which use this kind of energy, which produces a lot of amount of carbon, is too high. So what is needed most is to cut the emission. Then issues about tree planting and all that, yes, it is important, but not priority as it is with cutting the emissions. And I think what I would like to say is that if an organization is supporting tree planting to a certain organization or groups, I think now there is a GPS code, but it is important to have a strong monitoring mechanism to follow up with the project or the trees which have been already planting. It's good to once in a while, though we are discouraging flight, but again, it's good to follow up. It's good once in a while to also visit and see the projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. And yeah, I was like really pleased that we visited. I mean, we visited not together this really good project that Stephen Kamya is running as the forest farming project. And I hope that in future event we'll hear more about such project. I really want to thank our three speakers, Dennis, Danny, and Rema, for your contribution. It's been fantastic. We learned a lot. Certainly a lot of food for thought and more questions coming through now, but we actually want to talk to each other. So thank you so much for joining. I mean, if you want to stay behind for some of the breakout rooms, feel free, but you can also carry on with your Sunday. We are really grateful. We're really grateful that you gave up part of your Sunday to join us. So thank you very much, everyone. And for our Servas members who are staying behind, we're now going to take a little bit of time. We are a little bit behind, about 7 minutes behind. So hopefully some of you will allow the event to maybe finish a little bit after past. But we had scheduled for about 15 minutes of discussions in breakout rooms. We have set up a breakout room per area. And at the bottom of your screen, you can actually click on the breakout option, and I think that are you able to copy the questions into the chat that we are asking people to look at? I know you circulated them by email already, but basically we are asking you two things to reflect in your breakout rooms. Let me just find them. What actions would you like Servas International to take forward to support the environment? And what actions will you take for the environment after the Peace Forum with your Servas National Group? So there are the two questions that you can explore. We'll make sure that we also post them in the chat. But if you click on the breakout rooms button, at the bottom of your screen, you will see you are able to join different rooms. So if you are Asia, it's room 1 and 2. Mediterranean is room 3 and 4. EU, except the Mediterranean countries, is room 5 and 6. Britain and Ireland, you're going to 7, 8. Africa, you're going to 9, 10. North America to 11. And South America and Mexico to 12. So please do click the join button next to those rooms accordingly. And if you remain in this room, we will be able to help you to migrate to the room that you're supposed to be in. So I'll just give you a minute to do so, and we'll be posting the questions in the chat as well, so everybody's got them. Okay, so we've got some people coming back from the breakout rooms now. Welcome back.
Oh. Unfortunately, we had some communication problems.
It is not easy online from lots of different countries, so but don't worry, this is only the start of some conversation. Welcome to everybody from the breakout rooms. It would be great if people can stay on mute so we don't have background noise. I think there are still some people due to come back in 6 seconds. Yeah, I think everybody should be coming back now. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. I know it was very little time in our rooms, but as I've explained before, you know, this is only the start of a process, the start of a conversation. We're going to do far more of this, and hopefully, you know, many of you are going to join us for this. So if you are interested to continue the conversations, to volunteer to join a new Servas International working group and help plan our next steps, you can email me on servasenvironment@servas.org. I am putting the email into the chat. You can also send me a message now on Zoom if you want to volunteer. At this stage, we're not asking people to commit, you know, a lot of their time for a long period, but between now and our Servas International AGM, which I believe is in September, we're hopefully going to come with some ideas and recommendations for our next steps. So before we move to the conclusion, I just want to hear a few feedbacks from some of the groups. And so I'm just going to ask people to volunteer to tell us one thing they discussed in their group and see if there are any volunteers who would like to come in. Please raise your electronic hand or your physical hand. Okay, so I've got Stephen Kamya from Uganda. Would you like to come in, Stephen? And try to be short because we haven't got much time. Stephen? Okay, you're gonna have to find out how to unmute yourself. So meanwhile, I'm gonna take Karen when you work out your tech issues. Karen.
Yeah, we spoke about maybe providing some information to all of the national secretaries and peace secretaries about different environmental actions they could take and ask each one to commit to one of them for the year, and that could change each year, or they could add another one each year. And so at least begin to start, like all of the peace camps maybe should have an environmental component, that they work on a project for a day or something. Something like that, and then give the information about how they can work in their community to help on the environment, ask them to seek out local groups that they can work with, so that we can do that from an international to a national and local level.
Thank you so much. And certainly, if any national groups want to invite me to come along to discuss ideas, I'll make myself available to do so. Thank you. Stephen, I think you now unmuted. Do you want to make your contribution?
Yeah, thanks very much, Cara, and the entire team from Team Servas. You're doing a very great job. In our group, we thought about working with existing civil society organizations and government organizations to have a cooperation with them. And in that way, we need to think about sustainability plan. I can give an example of how we try to do it. We work with farmers, schools, and religious institutions. We train them, and the team we train, they disseminate information to other groups, grassroots farmers. In that way, we have partly tried to impact. So it's really important to think about in that line. We also thought about when we tell people to plant trees, which kind of trees? We need to be considerate of the kind of species we mobilize people to plant. They are sustainable trees, like for the case of Uganda, we are promoting Ficus naturalensis trees, which are really nice under agroforestry. In this way, we encourage every farmer to have his or her own forest, and we believe a combination of that canopy can have far-reaching impact. About waste management, like plastic and other things, where polythenic materials, we are using schools, farmers to collect all this kind of waste and take it for recycling. So it's really important to cooperate with different parties within our localities, and then we see how we can impact. On 1st January, we launched a program where we mobilize people to do communal cleaning on like 2 times a month. And all kinds of waste collected, we take it for recycling. And information is being disseminated to several villages, and we believe we can have an impact. Ideally, we can duplicate this in other areas.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephen. And certainly in a future event, we would like to hear more of your project. I would recommend anybody who is visiting Uganda to go and see what the work that Stephen is doing is really impressive. A number of us have been there. So I'm sure we will hear more about that in the near future. Thank you so much, Stephen. I've got Jamie from the UK next.
Hi, Clara. Hi, everybody. In terms of the 2 questions, what actions should Servas International look to take forward? We think it's really important that Servas International engages with and supports member groups. Possibly there haven't been the resources to date, but moving forward, that's going to be a really important aspect of it. And in terms of what our member group can do, we'd like to see the possibility, or explore the possibility, of building relationships with sustainable travel organisations as part of raising awareness of our members about alternatives to flying. Those are perhaps the key issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And obviously in the UK, we've already set up our Servas, Britain and Ireland environmental group. Hopefully you share the information that we are meeting tomorrow night, and the new people who were there from the UK hopefully will be able to join us very soon.
I hope so.
Thank you. Zefrin from Tanzania, do you want to go next? Zefrin? You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, everyone. In our group number 10, regarding the questions, we discussed about the Servas members to share the success stories about the environment campaigns which have been done by Servas members in their regions. By sharing the success stories, we can have a very good campaign to other teams. Another thing we've seen, it was advocating the global environment policies. The policies like renewable energy and reforestations, that source can help. Another one with our group, it was a Servas member in the region to organize a yearly or quarterly planting of the trees, maybe to the schools or to the degraded areas, so as to set up the goals that each year a Servas member should plant a tree in a degraded area or to the schools, whatever. And we should set the achievable goals that every member of the Servas in the region should plant a tree. Another is set a clear action plan that aligns with environmental policies in our countries, coordinate with the local authorities to plant the trees and in forested areas. As well, in our local communities, Servas members can conduct the webinars, workshop, and session about the environmental topics. As well, working together with a joint initiative which have been already done. As well, we know we have a World Environmental Day in each country. I think so that the Servas member can be cooperate with during the World Environmental Day and share the photos, share during his or her participation, in the World Environmental Day in the regions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I'm sure there were other ideas that you discussed, but that's really good start to hear. One last time, if you want to take part in the next step, please do email me or message me in the chat. I've seen a number of people doing that. And okay, I've got Martha as well. I'm going to take Martha. We didn't hear from South America yet, so go on.
Yes, I am very, very new to Servas, so sorry if I am repeating things, but just as an observer, I should say one element when dealing with planting trees, and I was very honored to have met Wangari Maathai when she was very young. I met her in Kenya, and you see, she built this green belt movement, and when she died, 30 millions of trees. But I should say that the tree planting, especially when I hear that most of the trees were dying, reflect and to ask the question how stronger we have used the idea of planting trees to reconnect with the people who are the best guardians of environment in the world, because this will be to promote a connection with agricultural people and with indigenous people. They really know about trees, they really know about the overall process. So if they are coming together in this effort, that is wonderful. That is one thing. Second thing, it will also planting trees promote the interaction with organizations like, for instance, early childhood organizations in every country, because we have to bear in mind that for peace, we really need to start the earlier the better. So I think that will promote, I don't know if Servas have an educational group, I imagine. So it will be a connection also between working groups, because the overall framework is peace. Then another thing that we are starting to observe on the private section, how for funerals, I don't know, this is in all Latin America, but I wonder if it is also in other continents, we used to give flowers. You know, this huge arrangement of flowers that last one day, because now almost everyone go into cremation. But then what happened? They threw away. So now private business is starting to plant trees in the memory of the persons who have died. And this is a wonderful initiative from the private sector that I think we could take it further to something to promote more as a service in the civil society. So these are little things that I just met with the lady from Brazil and from Miriam from Mexico. So I'm very happy to be part of this overall effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martha, for your contribution. And if you've got other ideas or thoughts following the meeting, don't hesitate to email me with those. Let's stay in touch. And I just want to thank, obviously our speakers who have gone now, but also every single one of you for taking part in this forum, sharing your ideas. And I'm just going to now pass on back to May for the last few minutes and the conclusion of this meeting. Thank you, everybody. And May, the floor is yours.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone, your ideas and inspire with each other. So it is so lucky we have this platform. It's a global platform, so we can connect to each other. So this is just the first Peace Forum. We talk about environment. Maybe if it's necessary, we may arrange another one or another meeting to discuss more. Thank you for joining us, and hope you also get something from this meeting, and we see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
再见, bye bye.
Thank you. That was amazing.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. When I play